And welcome to Talking Europe on France 24. I'm in Brussels at the European Development Days, an event organised by the European Commission to promote development assistance and international cooperation. Now, just a reminder, Europe is by far the largest, the most generous international aid donor, accounting for over 50% of the total. Let me introduce you to my guest here on our set at Tour et Taxi in Brussels, Secretary Nicolas Imelda. You're from the Commission on Filipinos Overseas under the Office of the President of the Philippines. We're going to talk a lot about your country as an example of what aid, what assistance can do or can't do in some cases. Also with us, Alexandre Polak. Welcome. You're the spokesperson for EU Commissioner for International Cooperation and Development, Neven Mimica. You're also in charge of humanitarian aid. You're the organizer of this event, the European Development Days. And last but not least, also with us, Davor Ivo Stier. You're from Croatia. You're a member of the European Parliament from the centre-right European People's Party. And you're a member of the Committee on Development. Alexandre Polak, first of all, we all watch the news. We see these thousands of Africans who are desperate to leave their countries because of poverty, because of conflict. It shows that development, international cooperation, I guess, is more important than ever. And yet many critics will tell you we don't always see the benefits. We don't always see what it really brings.
You're absolutely right. I think, as you remember, the EU accounts for half of aid to the poorest country in the world, 50%. Although Europe is a rich part of the world, it only accounts for 20% of the economic wealth in this world. So you see that it's quite generous, but it's not enough. It's not enough, and what we do is not enough known and visible. But when we ask European citizens, are you in favor, are you aware, we kind of get good results from the opinion polls showing that the extreme majority of Europeans, despite the economic difficulty, despite all we have, they are really in favor of Europe continuing to play a leading role because they see the link, because helping the poorest in the world, it's in our DNA, it's an obligation, it's solidarity, so it's doing good, but not enough. They understand that it's a good thing as well for the European economy and a good thing to tackle conflict and migration, the part of migration that is forced and forced people that don't have any other choice.
In terms of sheer figures, EU member states have committed themselves to devoting, I believe, 0.7% of their GDP to international cooperation and development assistance. A number of countries are doing very well. Britain, Scandinavian nations, Luxembourg, others less. Are you disappointed by the levels, the commitments we're seeing at EU level?
There are two things. First, it's great, and it's something that needs to be said, that Europe is taking this commitment, and we just retook the commitment that we have to achieve this 0.7. We are the only group in the global world so far that has taken this commitment. So we would love the others, United States, other partners, to take the same commitment. But as you rightly say, it's not enough. Many of our member states have not lived up to their commitment. They haven't respected their commitment. And we would like them to do more because there is no excuse not to do it. As we say, it's an investment. It's not only charity, it's an investment. All the studies we have, it's like €1 we put in development aid. It's something that generates good in terms of tackling conflicts, poverty, but bringing trade, investment, and more jobs for Africans, for Asians, for Latin Americans, for Europeans.
Secretary Nicolas, what is the view from the Philippines? I believe that your country has received more than €1 billion over the last decades in terms of grants, mainly to combat poverty and raise standards of living for the poor. The Philippines have a very interesting history, of course, a history of emigration. This brings benefits, but also costs. How has Europe helped you?
Well, I'll talk only about how Europe has helped us in terms of our migration governance. Well, to put it in perspective, we have 10.2 million overseas Filipinos. 48% of them are permanent migrants or dual citizens in 200 countries. 41% are overseas Filipino workers and 11% are irregular migrants. So those 10.2 million overseas Filipinos contribute something like $28 billion in remittances. Now, in terms of the EU assistance, as you may know, we are very much ahead in terms of our migration governance. So it's there where the EU is helping us in terms of mainstreaming migration and development in our national policy, and now we're going local. So EU is funding us in terms of mainstreaming migration in the provinces, in the towns and the cities.
And concretely, what does the EU do to tackle this issue?
Well, we're the ones who do it. They just fund us to do it, So we are introducing to the local authorities, the idea of that they have migrants in their midst and families in their midst, and they should come up with one-stop resource centers. So they are looked at by local authorities as development partners rather than as problems. In the past, they look at them as problems, or here we are, but now they're looking at them as development partners because they're bringing in remittances in the areas where they come from. So that's one way of changing the mindset, and that's where the EU is helping us, funding this particular initiative, which we call Joint Migration Development Initiative, changing the mindset of local authorities, looking at their migrants and the families they have left behind as development partners rather than as problems to the country, to their hometowns.
And as we see, migration is not only a challenge for Europe, it's also increasingly become a challenge, has become a challenge for Asia. Mr. Stier, you have visited, I guess, a number of countries where Europe is present, where Europe helps. You know the saying, if you give a man a fish, you will feed him for a day. If you teach a man how to fish, you will feed him for his lifetime. This is really the issue. You want to make sure that the aid is there to stay. It's not an end as such, but rather a catalyst. So tell me, what does work?
Well, I guess this is exactly the point. We are trying to refocus our European development cooperation policy, but we're also trying to change the global development framework. We had the Millennium Development Goals that are expiring this year. Now we want to replace them with a new set of goals, but a new framework that is addressing not just the symptoms of poverty, but also the root causes. The quality of institutions. We have a specific goal, we would like to have a specific goal on building inclusive and institutions that will actually foster good governance. Look at this. Every year, about $1 trillion is lost for developing countries because of corruption. Yeah, $1 trillion are coming out from developing countries. This is 10 times more than the official development assistance. So it would be really very important that we work not only in terms of the donations that are given in terms of development cooperation, but also the policies and projects that are strengthening the institutional capacity and the good governance in developing countries. This is exactly what you have said. So not just to give the fish, but to teach how to fish and then to have sustainable development.
Now, you mentioned the Millennium Development Goals. I remind our viewers that they were agreed by all UN members back in 2000. It's a set of targets that were to be met by 2015 this year. They should be replaced by a new set of targets called the Sustainable Development Goals, which are to be adopted, I believe, in September. When you look at all these objectives, these targets, would you say that the glass is half full or half empty?
I mean, if you look at things, what's evident is like we need these objectives, because even the critics of what was called the Millennium Development Goals realized that if we wouldn't have had these objectives, we would never have achieved what we have. It's not enough. You need benchmarks. So you need reference points that civil society can use to put pressure to say, you have not done that, you've done that, and that's good. So we need these objectives, and at least there is a consensus on that. But you see, the world has changed, and this next generation of objectives will be more fit to today's world, in that they will be universal, so they will apply to all countries. Before, we are more in this north-south, what the north can do to help the south. It's completely different today. It's how globally...
It was a very patronizing approach.
It was, but I mean, things were different. In a way, it still helped countries and they were empowered themselves. But now it's really about a global partnership where all the rich in the world help to tackle extreme poverty all over the world, and where we look at issues such as inequalities, such as peace, such as gender, that are the key ones. So it's the social issues still have to be the core, but they have to be tackled with a wider range of issues and for all countries together. So that's why they are so important, this objective, and that's why these European Development Days are so important, and we organize now, because in a month's time there is a conference where they will discuss the financing part, and exactly I cannot agree more.
In Ethiopia,
In Addis, overseas development assistance, it's good, but it's a drop in the ocean in comparison to all the thing, the mobilization of resources, public, private, that can actually make a difference in a country. And then in September, as you say, we really hope we will reach global objectives that are ambitious for everyone and that everyone will play its role, because we know at the end of the day that eradicating poverty really is something achievable, because halving the level of people living in poverty has been achieved, for instance. It's not enough, but it has been achieved. Eradicating it by 2030, it's something that is possible and that we own towards this generation, my generation, the next generation.
And yet,
Yeah, can I jump in? Because I also want to inform the audience that beyond the Millennium Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals are now covering migration. So again, to my area of expertise, and they're very good goals for migration in terms of, like for example, one, promotion of labor rights, including, and it specifically said, including rights of migrant workers and especially women workers, because as you know, it's now the feminization of migration. There are more and more women are going out of the country, and usually they're low-skilled workers, so domestic help and all that. So this is a recognition that they have to be protected, their rights have to be protected. The other one, of course, is safe, regular migration will be facilitated. And again, this one is very close to my heart. There's going to be a goal to reduce the cost of remittances to 3%. You know, before it's now ranging between 10 to 20. That's criminal. You know that you are getting that banks and remittance service are getting 20% out of remittances that are being sent from hard-earned money of. So now,
and that can make a huge difference for those families who are sending money.
Exactly. So now it's
home.
down. It should be down to 3%. So I'm very happy to say that.
You mentioned that fighting corruption is absolutely crucial. The question, though, there are countries where the authorities are not only corrupt but don't respect basic human rights. Is it a reason for Europe not to go there, or on the contrary, do they need us even more than other places?
Well, this is obviously a dilemma that we frequently face, but I think that it's clear that when you are active in a country where there's a systematic violation of human rights, then the European assistance should not go to the government, but actually to the civil sector that is trying to advocate the respect of human rights. The Commission, in this sense, is always...
And can you bypass the authorities in those
definitely,
countries?
when you have the the budget support mechanism, this is should not be applied in countries. For example, I will say very clearly, we discussed it with Commissioner Mimica in the last plenary session of the European Parliament. In countries like Eritrea, the Commission, of course, is not giving budget support to the government, and the Parliament is insisting that is a practice that should not be violated.
Putting pressure on Burundi as well.
So the assistance should go really to those in need. But obviously, Europe has developed good instruments in terms of combating corruption and preventing corruption. For example, in the enlargement process, and we have some elements of that in our neighborhood policy. We need to develop probably more assertive and effective mechanisms also for countries in the developing world, especially in Africa.
You mentioned that Europe accounts for 50% of the total amount of international aid that is being distributed around the world. The United States is doing a lot as well, but a number of emerging countries, I'm thinking of the Gulf states, maybe China, should they be doing more? And if so, how can you encourage them to do more?
I mean, when the child dies of hunger every 5 seconds, everyone has to do more. It's not something that is acceptable, whether you're American, you're Chinese, you're European. So, of course, everyone has to do more. I just gave again the figure. We account for 50%. We are 20% of the economy. So yes, we have to do more ourselves, but the other ones clearly have to do a lot more. We have to. But when we say we have to, it has been said very clearly, it's not only public money and public assistance. It's really tackling all these issues together. The issue of tax evasion, tax havens, fighting corruption, strengthening governments. All this happens mainly at national level. But if we've got global objectives that force and force by peer pressure national governments and with the pressure of civil society to deliver for access to food, to deliver for access to education, to basic services, we are more likely to try to get this progress. And as said, we've got with the European Commission many types of instruments to make sure that whatever the political situation, we find ways to reach or directly the population with or without the government. We try to always work with the authorities. It's not always possible, but in the majority of cases, we're just here to support partners. That's what's happening in the Philippines, for instance.
Well, just to talk on good governance, I'm happy to say that the European Commission has an agreement with the Philippines, and they decided to focus on two areas. One is good governance, very good rule of law, budget management, and all that. So, of course, the second one is on energy. But I think it was a very well thought out agreement. They decided where the money should go, where it is most needed in the Philippines, given the state of the economic affairs right now and the kind of government we have right now. So we thank the European Union for that.
If I may jump in, I mean, if we manage to increase the collection of taxes, for example, by 1% in developing countries,
That's
we
right.
will get resources that double actually the
That's
official
true.
development assistance. So we need to mobilize domestic resources as well.
That's true.
So
Very good.
the ball is also with
On our
those
end.
countries
That's right.
who can and must do more. Secretary Nicholas, a reminder, viewers, that you are from the Commission on Filipinos Overseas and the Office of the President of the Philippines. Thank you very much for having spoken to us. Alexandre Polak, you're the spokesperson of two commissioners, I believe, of Neven Mimica, the commissioner in charge of international cooperation and development, and of Mr. Stylianides, who is in charge of humanitarian aid, and Davor Ivo Stier, you're from the European Parliament from Croatia, and you're a member of the Committee on Development. Thank you very much to all of you for having taken part in this edition of Talking Europe. Now, please stay with me. I'll return just after the news break in about 10 minutes on France 24.